Educational Communications and this station present Environmental Directions with Nancy Pearlman. On this series, we explore the effects of human influence on the Earth's ecosystems and discuss solutions to environmental problems which affect the quality of life on this planet. Environmental Directions gives you the kind of information you need to help you participate in decisions impacting your community, the nation, and the world. Now, here's your host, Nancy Pearlman.
Hello. For the next half hour, we are going to be talking about a variety of topics, from preserving historic items, including comic books, to saviors and heroes trying to save the planet, to exploring the Himalayas with my guest, Adam Schomer. He is a conscientious filmmaker, president of Eye2Eye Productions, and is known for going to extreme lengths to follow stories that empower us. Feature documentaries of his include the award-winning The Highest Pass, The Polygon, One Little Pill, and Women of the White Buffalo. He is also well known for producing the #1 iTunes bestseller and Netflix hit, Heal. He has created and directed the docuseries The Road to Dharma, a heart-pounding and spirit-driven quest to find freedom on motorcycles in the Himalayas, and wrote its companion online course for living a life of freedom. He just finished directing and producing the 4-part documentary Selling Superman, and writing and directing the feature documentary Finding Peace, featuring the famed Tibetan Buddhist monk Matthew Ricard. Eye2Eye's newest feature doc in development is Aaron's Law, of which Adam is the executive producer. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you on the program.
Thank you, Nancy. It's a pleasure to be here, part of history. This amazing show you've been doing.
Well, you have been doing amazing documentaries, and I want to touch on a lot of them because they have many different kinds of themes. But I think overall, you care about people caring about preserving the earth, loving the earth, caring about items that we have created on this earth. Why do you feel it's so important to make these feature films that share what people are doing in taking care of historic items and exploring wild nature, including riding motorcycles at the highest pass in the world at 18,000 feet?
The reason is when we look at the inner world, when we take pilgrimages, when we empower ourselves, when we start caring for ourselves, we intuitively and naturally would start also taking care of the people around us and our earth. And likewise, when we start to, like the feature documentary with Matthew Ricard in Iceland, when we spend time in nature and when we embrace nature, we tend to maybe worry less about ourselves. Our vision expands a bit and we see our place in the world more, which usually makes it less stressful. Our agenda drops away and we're a little more at peace. So I think all these adventures and things that look to empower us from within also recognize the power of nature, of preserving nature that can help that inner journey, right? And nature reminds us of our true mother, which keeps us alive. If the earth isn't here, Nancy, we're donezo. So there's no inner journey unless the Mother Earth is here to preserve us. So I think it's a natural combination of loving Mother Earth, protecting the earth, and nature goes hand in hand with inner work, inner empowerment, be it on motorcycles, be it in Kazakhstan, looking at what happened there, or even comic books and how our parents affect us.
There are so many diverse issues, but they are related to the concept of caring for the earth so that we care for it and it cares for us. Your documentaries have won many awards at film festivals, winner Audience Award at the San Diego Film Festival, winner at the Topanga Film Festival, opening night film Illuminate Film Festival. Why do you enter in those film festivals when you really need to be out there where all of us can enjoy in the theater the stories that you're telling?
Well, sometimes at the festivals, it's nice where you get to see a movie with a huge group. Illuminate Film Festival, we showed the film Heal to 700 people at one time. That community is powerful. You know, you get to have an experience together. And then likewise, in the theaters, it's wonderful to show it in the theaters where people can see it. And as you know, nowadays, also, people watch a lot digitally. It's hard to escape that, especially with the doc series. It's a little more difficult, right, to show it in theaters because of the length of time. But the doc series are so powerful because you can go deep into topics.
You have gone deep into topics where you have followed people for many months, few years. When I first thought about interviewing you, I went and saw your latest program, Selling Superman.
Yeah.
I thought, well, that doesn't really have an environmental environmental theme. We're talking about a comic book character. But of course, Superman was out there saving people, the planet, in many other ways. The superhero has really caught on, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think the superhero is so embedded in our culture. It's so embedded in our psyche. I think there's relationship to religion, to be honest. The idea of savior is important to me, is interesting. We maybe have turned our back on religion a little bit in this country, or a little more independent thinking, and thus the new saviors that step in some ways, are our stories, our myths, and here comes superheroes. And in some way, the way we might look for a savior to save us spiritually, be it a messiah that comes, we also look to these superheroes to save us from our world or evil or circumstances. And what I think is appropriate here to talk about, what I feel like, is that sometimes disempowers us. When you're waiting for someone else to do it, when you're waiting for a savior to come in and save yourself or save the earth, then you tend not to take responsibility as much and say it's in my hands. And I know we all have to take responsibility for caring for the planet. We all have to take responsibility for our little part. To be honest, I know the governments of the world need to take responsibility. It's like, what are they waiting for? Are they waiting for an alien race to come in and give us the technology to save us? It's like, it's not going to happen. So to me, the idea of savior, I look at it, not a bad thing, but because a lot of people read these books and it really gives them an escape from some difficult circumstances in life, and entertainment can be a nice escape. But over time, I feel like that archetype and I feel that myth does make us wait rather than take action. And I do worry about that when it comes to our culture and media and the way we look at climate change.
I grew up reading comic books. Yeah. I love them. My brother saved them. He's got hundreds. I'm not sure the value of them, but watching your documentary, I found it amazing that the first edition of Superman is worth over $2 million. And you have a friend who actually has a collection. And what I find intriguing is how you went to a secret location, didn't want to show where it was in the movie, but it was under very controlled environment to preserve and protect these unique historic items. And that is something that we forget is so necessary if we want to protect history from the past.
Absolutely, and these things can degrade, right? If they're not protected well, these comic book pieces of history, who knows? Will people even read books so much in the future rather than it all be digital? It's so nice to touch something, to read it, to feel the paper it's written on is amazing. The value of that Superman #1, which is graded at a 7.0, so the grade determines the value in many ways. 7.0 is very high quality grade, especially for a book from 1939. His book is probably worth $3.5 million. It's the second or third best Superman #1 in the world. It is fascinating that it happened to be a friend of mine who was keeping the secret. His father made them keep a secret for 40 years, that he was collecting all these books that were taking over the house. So you can imagine room after room and not having people over, not going on vacations, not being able to talk about it. Very difficult. But in some way, it tore the family apart, but in some way, the father was preserving some history too. And now, thankfully, the son, Darren, is sharing those books. I think part of what he'd like to even do at some point, if it was possible, is have them in museums for other people to see. And he's doing a great job, as you mentioned, of preserving them. Climate controlled, high security. It's like his fortress of solitude for those that follow Superman metaphors. The story is fascinating with kind of the confluence of pain and trauma and unboxing the old family stories. He wants to rewrite it and make it something that's positive because it is so sacred. These are pieces of pop culture. They represent racial history. They represent female empowerment. They represent a lot of issues. The comic books were talking about a lot of things before a lot of times mainstream media was.
I was surprised when the individual who was in charge of determining the quality of the book looked through each page but didn't have white gloves on. I have been to libraries and archives where they have preserved and protected unique items, and the archivists always put on the white gloves. What's the reason that they didn't do that?
Yeah, in the series I asked the same thing. Like, we cut the music. I'm like, wait, he wasn't wearing gloves? What's going on here? My voice impact of the film is another thing we can talk about some other day, but we're definitely in the film. But he said that, this is the president of CGC, the grading company, he said that you're more apt to make a mistake if you have something between you and the paper. You're more apt to hit an edge if you're wearing a rubber glove or for it to stick. So it's better that they just really wash their hands, are clean, and use their fingers. Not what you'd expect, but I guess they're less worried about oils per se, and just more worried about if they're going to nick a corner or tear something.
How many books are in this historic collection? And you aren't going to tell us where, but I'm worried about natural disasters. I mean, I'm here in Southern California. We just had homes totally destroyed by fire. We read about the floods and the hurricanes and the tornadoes in other parts of the country. Do these places that take care of these unique collections have some sort of extra protective layer to avoid being destroyed by a natural disaster?
Yes, I mean, Darren's specific collection, 300,000 comic books and 1 million collectibles in total, so baseball cards as well as toys and things like this. They're all in Metro Detroit area. We can say that. That's not a problem. It's well known that he's in the Metro Detroit area. So there's not many earthquakes in that area, which is nice. Flooding can happen. There's not a ton of fires either. So it's fairly safe like that, but there's a warehouse that holds another little warehouse, and then within that warehouse are 3 shipping containers. So the shipping containers are very fire resistant, and each one is separate, so if one was to go, the other one wouldn't. And then there's another special safe that houses all the really important books, and all those books then, are in slabs, are in plastic slabs to really maintain them not degrading from air as much. They still do age, but it keeps them from being torn and broken, and that on a commodity level helps drive the whole investor pricing thing, for better or for worse. It's not my scene, selling books for thousands and thousands of dollars, but I love the idea of preserving them and showing them in museums and a piece of history. My dad would go to the store and get a comic book from the local store and read it, and it's cool to know that some of those actual books are around, that these people were touching way back then in the 30s and the 40s, the 50s.
It was really fun to watch the documentary and see what was involved in collecting these items and how the family dealt with what has turned out to be important collections. How long did you spend doing this documentary and your other documentaries? Do you have a set time that you allow yourself to follow the characters, to tell the stories?
I mean, I tend to like to finish them. Some documentaries can go on forever and ever. Part of it is budget driven. You have a certain amount of budget, so you need to finish. But in this case, with Selling Superman, the first time I shot was November 21. So that's 3 years to get to this moment where we're now released and people can watch it. I would say the bulk of the work was 2 years, from May of 22 to May of 24, where we were filming full on and then editing. And editing for this kind of thing took about a year. For the other projects, some of them, because they're a little more contained, like the Polygon, where we went to Kazakhstan and we were looking at the years of nuclear testing and the effects on people. We went there and just spent our good 5-6 weeks and really lived with the people, got to understand the issue, shot. You're not going back and forth from Kazakhstan, and you're certainly not going back and forth from that area, because once you land somewhere, you're talking another 6 hours to this place and another 6 hours to the next place. You're really far out there, but those villagers have seen some difficult and mental impact. So for something like that, we shoot quickly. 6 weeks to me is quick, but it's contained, and then you come back home and you file through the story and try and write it. Road to Dharma and the Highest Pass, similar. You're on a pilgrimage, so that could be a 5-week thing in the Himalayas on motorcycles. And as an aside, on the Highest Pass, we got to see wild horses at 15,000 feet, and that was really actually my dream of that trip. It was like, I really just hope we see the wild horses.
And there's so much more to see in these places, and we will be talking more about your films when we return in a moment with my guest, Adam Schomer, who is the president of Eye2Eye Productions. We'll be back in a moment.
Environmental Directions with Nancy Pearlman continues with further discussion of the world's critical ecological issues. For more information, you may call 310-559-9160 or go to www.ecoprojects.org. Now, here's Nancy.
I'm speaking with Adam Schomer, who is a director, producer, writer, and president of Eye2Eye Productions with many award-winning films. You've mentioned the film Polygon. That is telling a story of the nuclear testing that the Soviet Union did in what is now an independent country, Kazakhstan, and how the environment and the people are all affected by the hazardous radiation. Could you give us us a little bit more detail?
Yeah, it's called the Polygon because that area is kind of shaped like a polygon, and that's what they called it, this big area where they were testing. And there's villages that were in the surrounding areas. You can imagine in the U.S. we tested nuclear bombs, and still people were very affected in Nevada, right? And they weren't exactly sure how bad some of this radiation was. You can imagine the Soviets cared even less about the people in the surrounding areas. Some think they were even using them as guinea pigs in many ways. They would say, come out of your homes, witness the might of the Soviet Union, watch the bombs go off, and then all that dust comes right over them. Could have at least said, stay in your house, close your windows. But often they were saying, come outside. There were sometimes, big craters that were created in lakes that were from tests, and people didn't know it. One lady talked about driving home with a bus full of her fellow nursing students, and they all swam in the lake, and she said every person in her class died before the age of 28. The rates of death in these surrounding areas just let you know that radiation is a big problem because they would do testing underneath. They would get in the water system, and that water going to the vegetables, going into people's water table, even going all the way out to the oceans. You just see the real devastating impacts both on land, on water, on food, and then generationally into the DNA. To be frank, the Kazakhstan government said they would take care of these people when they left the Soviet Union, and they really have not. And so that was part of our documentary, is to show that the people were really banding together and taking care of themselves, and the government was in some ways denying how bad the effects are on the earth and on the water and on the people. We want to bring light to it.
It's an important message that nuclear power is dangerous and harmful, and as we try and get net zero, go to renewable energies, so many of the oil and gas and energy companies are saying nuclear is safe, but you have pointed out it's not, and it hasn't been.
Specifically nuclear weapons they were testing, right? So, a little different than nuclear power. I can't speak as much to that, but they were just straight up blowing 400 nuclear bombs.
Let us hope that those bombs are not used.
It's absurd that many tests, underground, above ground, in the air. It'll blow your mind.
I'm just hoping we don't have a nuclear war where we have to see bombs hurting people and the environment. You mentioned that the Kazakhstan people in the nuclear testing area have really suffered health-wise.
Yes.
How has your documentary helped them? Have they seen it? What is their response? Are they able to use it in any way to try and get better treatment and be able to get rid of some of that radiation?
So they have seen it, and yes, they love it because we shine a light on how strong they are as a community and how deep the issue is. And it has helped because I know it's put some pressure on the government, and it's also helped raise money for them because the government doesn't always do what they should. And so it's helped people donate and raise money and help the villagers with just basic things like food and medical supplies and having a nursing station right there in town. Because a lot of these villages, they're small villages. They're just, overlooked all the time. And the government tends to think, oh, no, you're crazy. You're just making all this stuff up about the years of testing, and you're just complaining. Yeah, the movie pressured the government. The movie helps people support and raise and be aware of the issue. And then maybe on a greater scale, Nancy, it just helps people understand that nuclear testing and nuclear war, how devastating it would be to life on this planet.
Your film, Women of the White Buffalo, is interesting. It's about the Lakota, and the white buffalo has a special meaning in that indigenous Native American Indian group. What's the significance?
I won't probably do it justice, I would say, but I know it's a spiritual figure, and it's a figure of coming prophecy in many ways. Really, they believe the feminine should be running the show. Again, the words I'm using are not their words, but the feminine used to be running the show when it came to the Native tribes, and then a lot of it shifted because when the white man came in, they wanted to speak to the chief, and so they wanted a man, so they put a chief forward. But the matriarch was really highly regarded, and I think that's really important to the belief system of working with nature, not exploiting nature. The film is part telling the history of how there was a genocide that happened to the Native Americans, specifically here with the Lakota up in South Dakota and the Pine Ridge Reservation, but also the present day, how it continues in many ways by the laws and rules and things that lead to the murdered and missing indigenous women. And again, they're trying, and we always focus on the positive. The women there and the elders there are trying to really teach the kids again, like how to work with nature, how to grow our own food, how to live a little bit more off the grid, and how to adapt to not necessarily shun Western society. So that's a big thing I learned about the Native culture is like we're an adaptable people, is what they say. We adapted the horses. We brought the horses in. We can adapt to Western culture and bring in our sensibility of working with nature.
I'd like to hear more about your love of India, the Himalayas. You've done the highest pass, is a group of motorcyclists traveling a road at over 18,000 feet, considered the highest road in the world. You've also done the road to Dharma. You have incorporated some Buddhist philosophy into these documentaries, but I love the mountains, the Himalayas. I flew over them. I didn't hike all of them except in the lower parts. So tell us about the beautiful environment, the experience of doing that kind of eco-adventure.
The first time I got to the Himalayas, my first trip to India, I probably, like yourself, just fell in love and wanted to walk into them. I just wanted to disappear into the Himalayas and go. I couldn't, of course. I was with people and didn't have the means to do that. But it set the stage for wanting to go back into the high Himalayas and visit the temples. The whole plain that we went into, the whole plateau, really, the Ladakh Plateau is all above 11,000 feet. And to get there even is very treacherous on motorcycles. And maybe I was stupid to do it, but I didn't really know how to ride a motorcycle. But my guru said, hey, would you like to come? He had a prophecy he would die, and it all sounded very dangerous. So, okay, let's film it. And it's myself and other riders. We took on this journey, which was really the highest pass within, but often you're going to have to face some danger. One thing I really did want to see was up on this Ladakh Plateau. Ladakh's a region in India, and it's all the Himalayas, as I was saying, was the wild horses that are there. And you never know if you're going to come across them. It's huge, huge, vast land, and the roads are one road, more or less, that's going through all this. And we were lucky enough where we came across these wild horses, you know, with the kind of the wider noses and the wider faces. They ran right next to our motorcycles. We got off our motorcycles. Some of the people rode with them. And they were just beautiful, wild horses. You don't really see that nowadays around. A little bit in the West, and I know you're doing some work to try and help them.
They're very threatened here in the western part of the United States, and we're trying to make sure that the wild horses are not killed off. And what's interesting is that the wild horses evolved originally in North America, went across the Bering Straits into Asia, so that they developed their own breeds, so that you saw wild horses that have probably had their herds there for thousands and thousands of years.
Absolutely. And then likewise, thousands of years, some of these temples and the native people there in the high Himalayas that have adapted to the air. The air at 15,000 feet is quite a different thing.
And what other animals and plants and ecosystems did you pass through? You saw glaciers, but of course those glaciers are disappearing with climate crisis and change, and so I'm sure you've seen some changes go on.
Absolutely. Ladakh is gorgeous. It's very dry in many ways. You have the high peaks and the snow, and then there's also a kind of a desert, the Nubra Valley. Once you go over the 18,000-foot highest road in the world, you get to drop into the Nubra Valley, and it's pretty much that's the only way in there. Then you're suddenly in this desert with camels. That was fascinating to see, and some of these places do just take you back in time, and they're a little more simple, and it makes us realize how important nature is and beauty is. And some of these temples are, again, 2,000, 3,000 years old, and the monks and, as you mentioned, the Buddhist teachings are very much about non-harm or non-violence. Of course, being one with nature and recognizing that nature can, in many ways, heal us.
How many miles did you cover on the motorcycle in the Himalayas? Because I hiked in the Himalayas, or the Annapurna Range, and you can't cover quite so many miles, but you have a different experience. Are you planning to show people river rafting? Are you planning to show people walking more, not just taking those motorcycles?
I don't know. Like I said, sometimes different things come my way. We are thinking about doing a season 2 of Road to Dharma, so that would be again on motorcycles. And hiking, absolutely. I'm very also interested in just the way people live communally in villages, so that's something I'd like to explore in different parts of the world to see who's working with nature in certain ways and how they're doing it as a group. I don't think we're supposed to be so siloed off in our own little houses here.
It's so great that you have documented some of these places, people, activities, issues, such a variety of films that you have produced, directed, written. Most documentaries tell a story. They have interviews, narration, but music is so important. What kind of ethnic traditional music have you incorporated in these programs?
Such a cool question, because music does drive a lot of the emotion, especially within documentary. And what I love about The Highest Pass and Road to Dharma is our fusion of Indian music, Indian instruments, and giving things pacing. You know, we're on motorcycles, so we're moving forward with some pace and some drive. So you might mix an electrical guitar with some tabla and some sitar. So Michael Malura, who scored both of those films, is fabulous at that. And he's a psychotherapist himself and a yogi himself. The Polygon, Vivek Mandala did that. And that music, again, we're taking some of the strings and the feelings of Kazakhstan and traditional music, but modernizing it. I'm in awe, to be honest, of the composers that work on the films because they can do these things. It helps really set the tone.
You have documented environmental issues, health issues, women's issues in the form of a documentary, which I think is so important. I enjoy them so much. Do you think that some of the issues that you've presented will become incorporated into the movies that are fiction so that we see more of these same concerns in a different dramatic form?
Yeah, I think so. I think Selling Superman, the documentary we're releasing now, really could be a narrative series or a narrative feature film. I think that could be incredibly interesting to act. It would help more people realize the conditionings we receive from society and our families. And Women of the White Buffalo, it'd be amazing if so. There's so many stories there, so many characters in the documentary that someone could latch onto and say, oh, these are our central characters. Likewise, I think The Polygon, there's plenty there to tell. Those tend to be some of the movies I've always loved the most, anything that's based on a true story, but then we get to see the actors and the narrative feeling, the fictional feeling, and through line that drives us and entertains the mass audiences. Because not everyone is like you and me, where we love sitting down for a documentary that educates us, but they're going to watch something like The Big Short, and then they'll figure out this is what happened, and the powers that be economically with the housing crisis.
Where do people get more information? Where can they see the trailers and see the films?
For the one that's coming out right now, just came out, we would go to sellingsuperman.com, so the word selling and then the word superman.com. And for all my films and the links to those, it's called Living Eye to Eye. So the word living and the letter I, number 2, letter I.com. Livingeye2eye.com. That's my company, Eye to Eye Production. And you'll see links to Road to Dharma, which is, again, Motorcycle in the Himalayas, The Highest Pass, and Women of the White Buffalo, and The Polygon, Heal, and, of course, Selling Superman. And hopefully the one we filmed recently in Iceland will be out soon. That's called Finding Peace.
Iceland's a beautiful place. What can you see in that film?
It's about a woman dealing with illness and going to a Buddhist monk, Matthew Ricard, to ask how do we ease suffering. And one of the ways he says is to, of course, drop your agenda to become bigger, expand your awareness, and nature helps us do that. So his teachings in there are very powerful.
Going out in nature, even in the city, is important, and we have that opportunity everywhere, even in Southern California. Go into the Santa Monica Mountains, go into the native plants, walk along the beaches, walk along the hills. There's so much to see and do, isn't there?
Yeah, my favorite thing is doing yoga down by the beach and then taking a dip. I just love it.
What is the online course Living a Life of Freedom about?
The docu-series The Road to Dharma, again, motorcycling through the Himalayas on motorcycles, is the sequel to The Highest Pass, right? So we went with a new group and motorcycled to new sites in the Himalayas, all looking at freedom. The series, the doc series, is so packed with wisdom, I thought I would then unpack it into a course and go deeper. So you take the wisdom, wrote a chapter about each wisdom that relates to each episode. So again, you see an episode and you're engaged and you're going on, and you're watching it and you're binge watching. That chapters help you then reflect on what did we learn in there, and then there's a meditation that goes along with that theme of freedom, and then there's bonus features, some longer discussions or scenes that we're not able to show in the whole series. So each chapter really gives you an aspect of freedom. So 10 aspects of freedom, 10 episodes, 10 chapters, 10 bonus features, and it's all toward living a life of freedom. Who doesn't want to be more free, both internally and externally? A very important topic.
I'm looking forward to seeing all of your films. Thank you so very much for creating such beautiful documentaries. Thank you for being my guest.
You got it. Thanks for doing all the work you're doing. Appreciate you.
Thank you. I have been speaking with Adam Schomer, who is president of Eye2Eye Productions. I'm Nancy Pearlman. Thank you very much for joining us, and do tune in again next week.
If you would like free information about these environmental issues, go to www.ecoprojects.org or call 310-559-9160. Environmental Directions with your host, Nancy Pearlman, is a community affairs program of the nonprofit organization Educational Communications and this station.